Greetings, Capitol High School. My name is Larry Bailey, and I would like to welcome all of our staff, students, and visitors to our 2020 Veterans Day Assembly. The Veterans Day Assembly at Capitol High School is a long-standing tradition. Each and every year, we gather together to honor our past and present veterans. This year does look a little bit different because we are practicing social distancing and trying to keep our space in the midst of this pandemic. But we will continue with the long-standing tradition of putting together a virtual Veterans Day Assembly. Before we transition on, I would like to say thank you to all of our current veterans, our retired veterans, all of the veterans serving West Virginia, and even more importantly, the veterans working right here in our building at Capitol High School. Once again, thank you, veterans. God bless America. Thank you.
When I think of our founding fathers, I envision a room full of men wearing suits, debating about how our country should be, but in a much more pleasant manner than witnessed in the debate between President Donald Trump and Vice President Joe Biden earlier this month. Our founders would be astonished with our country now, in both good and bad ways. We have come a long way from where our founders started us, but along the way we have also weakened our country. If our founding fathers were present in our country now, they would not say this is the country they envisioned. George Washington's farewell address to the nation in 1796 gives a clear picture of the country he hoped would live on. Our country's fathers spoke about the role of government to establish and maintain law and order, and the responsibility of individual citizens to respect the laws of the land when he said, "The very idea of the power and the right of the people to establish government presupposes the duty of every individual to obey the established government. Government is just a name if it is too feeble to withstand faction and keep each member of society within the limits of the laws. All people deserve the secure and tranquil enjoyment of the rights of person and property." Washington believed in a government of as much vigor as was needed to secure the liberty of the citizens. Washington also spoke about his stance on political parties, warning against the spirit of party generally. He believed being too loyal to one's party would undermine public administration and cause jealousy, false alarms, animosity, riot insurrection, and open the door to foreign influence. Washington anticipated that the alternate domination of one party and then the other would cause men to seek security in the absolute power of an individual, and eventually some leader would elevate himself to an absolute despot. Washington felt that founding parties on geographical basis would foster a lack of cooperation between different areas of the country. Washington thought that the groups should work together and make compromises instead of trying to win every battle. For all these reasons, he said that the spirit of party is the worst enemy of popular governments. Some may claim that this nation is the greatest nation on earth and is, therefore, exactly what the Founding Fathers intended. There is very little evidence in Washington's speech to indicate that his vision was for the United States to become all-powerful and dominate the world. When Washington warned against attachments and entanglements with other nations, one could interpret that as a warning against focusing too much on foreign matters and not enough on unity at home. Washington seemed to focus much less on winning and much more on character and compromise. He wanted this nation to become strong by finding compromise and respect for one another and obeying the laws, neither of which are happening at this moment. Currently, our country is caught up in riots and civil disobedience. Law and order were extremely important to Washington, as shown in his farewell address. He would have insisted that the state arrest those responsible for riots, burning of buildings, and looting. Washington would not have sent federal troops to make those arrests, but would have expected the states to handle these issues. Washington and the Founding Fathers envisioned a nation where men would work together and make compromises in running the government. This is not the current situation in our nation. There are such disagreements between the Republicans and Democrats that important offices such as judgeships go unfilled, and there's a gridlock on passing bills that would benefit the country, such as the current stimulus bill that would help those harmed economically by the pandemic. What would our Founding Fathers ask us to do now? They would ask us to stop fighting. They would ask us to sit and listen to one another. They would ask us to vote politicians out of office if they focus more on strife than on compromising. They would ask us to obey the laws of the land, even while working to improve them. This is what would make America great again.
It's undeniable that our vast nation of the United States has grown, stretched, and morphed into different variations of itself as time passes. Yet, is the United States still truly our nation? This country was crafted through blood, sweat, and tears to provide justice and liberty for all its people. Forged from the minds of brilliant leaders and the hearts of passionate patriots, our Constitution, as well as our system of checks and balances, have been the steel foundation that's been holding up our nation for nearly 250 years. The fathers of our country wished to see a nation truly free, unified for and by the people that would prosper long after them. Now, we continue to isolate ourselves from each other with fighting, tearing this nation in two like a pair of children fussing over a toy despite the seams beginning to fray. We're nothing more than two distant echo chambers with a slim window and occasional gunfire between the two. In modern years, or as far as I can remember in my mere 17 years on this planet, this nation has been undeniably divided, with tensions nearly as strong as they were during the Civil War. Between the rich and impoverished, the Democrats and Republicans, the government and the people, there simply seems to be no unification. Similar to a question young 8th grader Becklin Brown asked Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris during the 2020 vice presidential debate, how do we expect to get anything done as a nation if we can't get along with each other? The modern political debate is full of disrespect and slander. Neither side is truly given an opportunity to speak openly, forbidding each other from truly expressing their points to the fullest, no matter how much one may disagree. Your voice has become a privilege, not a right. The most recent time in history the entire country was unified was over the tragedy of 9/11, and this was over 18 years ago. 18 years of discourse, 18 years of division. Intolerance might be considered one of our nation's biggest challenges, as history has proven time and time again. It took decades for all men are created equal to become all people are created equal. Despite that, we do not have true equality. True equality to express oneself, their emotions, and their thoughts. True equality to be passionate without ridicule. True equality of opinions and respect for one another. It's impossible to predict the future, especially one that's over 2 centuries away. The best thing the Founding Fathers could have done to envision a bright future for our nation is get us started on the right foot, which they did beyond well by giving us a strong foundation that stood the hardy test of time. It's up to us and our young generation to repair what those before us have distorted and broken. One thing we cannot tolerate is this nation being broken apart further from the inside just because we won't respect one another. Repair our bonds, put our differences aside, and stand together. This nation needs us now more than ever. Regardless of red or blue, we're all human. Simply reminding ourselves of that is the first step.
America was founded with simple, core values. We all know that our Constitution was compiled by respected politicians, but these men were also white, wealthy, and entitled. While the words they wrote down declared equality, peace, and prosperity would reign, they turned themselves into hypocrites. Many of the men who contributed to making the document owned slaves, and carried the idea that women were best put to use producing children. Overall, what they wrote and signed off on did not match how they lived. For example, let's address some of their obvious discrepancies. There's a fair share of instances where the Constitution refers to, quote, all men, end quote. Hearing that now, you may assume that all men with no heed to race and perhaps even women would be included. That is due to the society we have created. It has grown into a place where all are truly equal in a legal sense. Women and people of color have become much more respected over time, but it was a privilege that they had to fight for, because the white men who wrote those very words meant them in a completely different context. To them, quote, all men, meant something else. They used it to address those like themselves, white men who had land and a respectable reputation. While that particular phrasing reveals a couple of key inconsistencies, there are plenty more, but they all lead towards the same general argument. For the most part, the Founding Fathers did not practice the ideals they worked to instill. Even so, it is important to consider the world that they inhabited. During their lives, slavery was prevalent, and women were not often respected. That was their norm, and while it is completely different from ours, it is still a critical point in history. Furthermore, Benjamin Franklin supported our Constitution, but he also made it clear that he believed it was as best as it could be for their time. This is a crucial detail, as it means that they had a completely different outlook, a different society, and therefore it makes sense that their words don't match how they lived. They put a different meaning on those terms because they had a perspective unlike one you would see today. This does not mend their lack of inclusion, yet it does provide more context for why they acted that way. Now, to consider our time. Much has changed since their first version of the preamble. New amendments have been created to ensure safety and equality. To us, this means that no matter your gender or skin color, we all have been given equal rights. This concept is our norm, but if someone had spoken to our founding fathers about truly giving everyone the same rights, they would have found the idea preposterous. It all comes down to the varying perspectives and differences in the times. I don't believe this was the America those men envisioned, because many of them were too blind to consider a black man leading our country or having a woman as a Supreme Court justice. Their vision was so tunneled, those things were never deemed a possibility. In the end, our founding fathers were blind. It was not from faults of their own, but from the world they were raised in and what they were raised to believe before they came together to make their historical contribution. Slavery was a large market, and they could not see African Americans in any other light until said people stood up and demanded better. Our world now is based around standing up and taking pride in yourself, as well as never settling for less than you deserve. They were not made for the world of today, just as many of us who are proud to step up and fight were not made for their world. Thank you.
My name is Staff Sergeant Retired Jeff Lambert. I'm the Army instructor at Capitol High School, JROTC. I've been asked to come out here today and take part in a celebration for our veterans. This is a very trying year. I know everybody's had a different tradition going on this year because of the pandemic, but millions of Americans have went out and showed up in force to show their greatest right, which is the right to vote. And that gives us another celebration for today. We're recognizing Veterans Day. Veterans Day is just a recognition and a basic thank you to all the veterans out there from all the branches of service that have served their country, are serving their country, to give us American civilians our freedoms. The American veteran has given up his freedoms at one point or another within his career serving our country, so that we as free Americans can exercise our freedoms. So that's why we celebrate Veterans Day, and that's why we're giving thanks today. Today my cadets are going to bring the symbol of our national freedoms, our American flag, to half-staff in recognition for all the fallen veterans.
Eyes have seen the glory of